Welcome everyone, my name is Jeff Rich and this is the Burning Archive, and in this video I'm going to share with you my complete guide to every single one of the Nobel Prizes in literature, all 121 Nobel Prizes in literature from 1901 to 2024 that you can find at the Nobel Archive at jeffrich.substack.com. Over the last 121 days, I set myself an extraordinary challenge. I decided I wanted to read every single one, at least a little bit of every single one of 120 Nobel Prizes in literature before the 2024 Nobel Prize winner was announced. And it has now been announced. It's Han Kang from South Korea. And I amazed myself. I might well have bit off more than I can chew, but I did complete this task, and I did write a post or shot a video on all 121 winners of the Nobel Prize between 1901 and 2024. It is an absolute treasure trove of literature in so many languages and from so many parts of the world, obviously with its biases and all that sort of thing, but nonetheless it is a surprising and wonderful window onto the cultural history of the world. I've been sharing those insights with you here on the YouTube channel, but I think there's no better way to actually really dig into, to explore the history of literature than actually reading the literature itself. And at my Substack, I've also been sharing with readers links to or excerpts from those 121 winners of the Nobel Prize, samples of their works, links to where you can read it for free on the internet, and guidance to where you can find these books in great public libraries. And I've gathered all that material together in what I call the Nobel Archive, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later in the video. What I've found is that the Nobel Prize in History really is a wonderful window into the cultural history of the world. After a while, I decided I would chunk up the periods of the Nobel Prize in Literature into 6 broad approximately 20-year periods. There's the period between 1901 and 1920 when, perhaps surprisingly, Germanic culture and Indian culture are surprisingly present, even more dominant than you think. There were many German writers, strictly German writers, but there were also writers who saw themselves as part of the pan-Germanic world. And there were also a deep influence of South Asian writing. Rabindranath Tagore won the Nobel Prize in 1913, but not only that, several winners of the Nobel Prize, the sort of European winners of the Nobel Prize in Literature, were profoundly influenced by Indian literature as well, including Romain Rolland and the rather obscure Carl Adolf Hjellerup from Denmark. Then the second broad period is between 1921 and 1939. And this period sees the rise, I guess, of Anglo-American writers. W.B. Yeats, he's Irish, not British, but he wins the Nobel Prize in the 1920s. One of the greatest poets ever to win the Nobel Prize. And in the 1930s, there's a succession of American writers. 3 American writers win the Nobel Prize in the 1930s. Sinclair Lewis, Pearl Buck, and perhaps the greatest of these 3, Eugene O'Neill. But I guess my personal favourite of the winners of this period is Thomas Mann, the great German novelist, author of The Magic Mountain, that has recently been adapted, so to speak, in a great novel by a later Nobel Prize winner, Olga Tokarczuk, The Impusium. Of course, World War II has a dramatic effect on the world, and in the period before 1939, before 1932 even, to some degree, Germany is the dominant culture in the Nobel Prize. For many good reasons, that changes dramatically after 1939. There is no Nobel Prize awarded until 1944, and from 1944 to 1964, you see the influence, I guess, of the emerging Cold War and a big surge of influence of Anglo-American literature. T.S. Eliot wins, William Faulkner wins, even Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister, the actual serving Prime Minister of Britain in that period, wins the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953. And there are Cold War controversies that strike the Nobel Prize, notably Boris Pasternak's win in 1956 for the novel that had been refused publication in the Soviet Union. Dr. Zhivago later turned into a memorable film by Omar Sharif, but I would highly recommend you read the novel by Boris Pasternak. It is great. And in my Substack, I also share with you what makes Boris Pasternak so important in Russian literature, which of course is not just Dr. Zhivago, the movie, but his great poetry. Then in the period between 1964 and 1983, I guess the Nobel Prize enters a more radical period, symbolised in 1964 by awarding the Nobel Prize in Literature to the radical Marxist existentialist writer, French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Of course, Sartre refuses the prize. And there are further controversies further on. In 1965, the Soviet Union writer, the only Soviet Union writer to win the prize without a cloud of Cold War controversy in the entire history of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Sholokhov wins the prize for Quietly Flows the Don. Samuel Beckett wins the prize, and there are further radical writers rewarded in the early 1970s. From 1984 to 2003, we see the influence of the end of the Cold War, the late years of the Soviet era in Poland and Czechoslovakia, with winners from those countries. Exiled or repressed writers from those countries winning the prize. And from about 1990, the long domination of the Nobel Prize by men rather than women starts to break. Nadine Gordimer wins the prize in the 1990s, and from then more women win the prize than previously. I mean, 1909 was when the first Nobel Prize, female Nobel Prize winner was awarded, and that was Selma Lagerlöf from Sweden. But there were only for Nadine Gordimer in 1991. The previous winner was Nellie Sachs in 1966, and before that, Pearl Buck in 1938. So that begins a new era in the prize that goes through to about 2003 and includes, awarding the prizes to people like Joseph Brodsky, Octavio Paz from Mexico, Toni Morrison from the United States, and a personal favourite, Seamus Heaney and Wisława Szymborska from the mid-1990s. In the period between 2004 to 2024, there was some level of return to some of the Nobel Prizes' old ways of preferring perhaps more than previously European writers, although in 2012 Mo Yan from China wins the prize. But there is much more dominance. And behind the scenes, there were some problems brewing in the Nobel Prize Committee, including a sex scandal that broke in 2017. The previous year, perhaps the Nobel Prize reached its low point in choices when Bob Dylan was given the prize in 2016, the American singer-songwriter, and the following year in 2017, a huge sex scandal caused a disturbance to the normal schedule of the prize. But since 2018, various reforms have been undertaken within the Nobel Committee, and there have been some remarkable and wonderful choices, since of whom I think my personal favourite is the 2018 winner, Olga Tokarczuk, the great Polish novelist who's written the books of Jacob and also the Impusium, both books I'll be looking at on the channel before too long. And there have been other excellent winners, including, of course, this year's winner, the first female Asian writer to win the prize, Han Kang from South Korea. Congratulations to Han Kang. And I've sampled a little bit of her writing since the announcement, and she really is a worthy winner of the prize. As I said, this is a fantastic window on cultural history. I do not recommend you set out to try to read all 120 Nobel Prizes in literature in 120 or 121 winners in 121 days. But what you can do is go to jeffrich.substack.com, and if you become a paid subscriber there, you will get access to my Nobel archive, which is your convenient guide to all the winners of the Nobel Prize in Literature, including my posts on them, my videos on them, and my links to their work, where you can read their works on the internet for free, or where you can also find their works by supporting them by buying their books. And I'll be keeping that refreshing and building that archive over time. So please do become a paid subscriber at jeffrich.substack.com, and you'll be able to explore the Nobel archive and all my other writing, talking and thinking about how to make sense of this puzzling world with quality history and literature.